Welcome to another Artis Opus video. We are tackling the Skelly Bobs. Look at these two. So first of all, in the tutorial, we're tackling a fairly different scheme, but something I'm really into, which is kind of the old world Araby, deserty vibes. They're really warm. The Verdigris isn't quite that crazy in real life, but the camera's really helping it pop off. It does do a lot for the paint scheme though, provides some real contrast in there and just makes the warm bits look warmer if anything. And then we're doing a more classic Skelly who I've actually mixed a little bit of purple in with pretty much every stage of this model. He looks a little bit like a moonlit skeleton. I've even suggested a light source coming from this side. You should see this side of his chest is more shiny than the other side. He turned out really well as well. In this tutorial at the beginning, which you can skip using the timestamps, they are there for your convenience. If you're not interested, I'm doing some interesting stuff working out how to work out paint schemes. So if you want to be armed with that information, stick around for it. Otherwise, just skip the first section of the video as per the timestamps and we'll jump straight into me painting it. Anyway, on the subject of jumping in, let's jump in. I realise we are meant to be painting some skeletons, so what on earth are we doing looking at a strange section of windows with nice scruffy writing on? Well, what we have here is our little experimenting section on our palette. I'm going to be laying down some silver here, some gold here, and these squares, and then we get to wash them and see how they look, and we've got a transition between them for a bit of a gold and silver mix. Down here though, we're just going to be putting gold, and I want to show you how much the colour underneath gold affects it, which should be quite a lot. It's even more if you're not airbrushing or stippling. If you're just layering it, it pushes through even more. But we've got Scrag Brown, Doomball Brown, Mornfang Brown, and Rhinox Hide from Games Workshop, and then we've put in Dubai Brown from Scale 75. So we're going to lay down the gold over those, then the silver, and then we'll jump back. Hopefully what you can see is basically the difference in how warm we are this end and how much cooler we are this end. This isn't coming out as clear on camera as it is in real life. There is a real noticeable warmth down this end, and then this end you just get like a, it's just dialed back a bit. It's just a bit less warm, and you wouldn't say it's cool. It's still a warmish color, but it has definitely reined that back a little bit. That came out pretty well. Always fun taking masking tape off. What we're going to do is I'm going to dry brush the top of each of these squares. So the silver will get dry brushed up to a brighter silver, and then the gold will get dry brushed up to a brighter gold silver hybrid. And yeah, we'll pot washes all over everything, and then we'll make our decision on exactly how we're going about painting these Skelly Bob's armor. Okay, so some contrast medium. We've got Skeleton Horde, Dark Oak Flesh, Snakebite Leather, and Gore Grunter Fur. I'll just go for a 1-to-1 mix. All of the contrasts have very different coverages, but just so you guys can follow along more easily, I'll go for a 50-50 mix. Skeleton Horde's kind of a little bit drab, muted and desaturated. That doesn't mean it's bad, it's just its properties, so it looks kind of how I was expecting. Cannot say the same for Dark Oak Flesh. Looks pretty good. Quite like that actually. Now, anyone who's used Snakebite will know just how potent it is. So maybe this one won't quite be 50-50. I do think this has got, yeah, let's get a bit more. I do think this has got real potential though. Nice. And then last but not least, I'm not sure if I've even ever used this one. We've got Gore Grunter. That is a pretty cool color too. So at this point, I quite like different aspects of each of these. So we might end up doing a mix. So we've got one more square left over. Why not? Still got some Gore Grunter Flair on my brush. Let's grab a bit of the Snakebite. Now that looks like a pretty good mix to me. That screams age. Quite like the ready tint here, but I think knocking it back slightly is definitely going to be a benefit. So I'll just experiment a little further on the squares I've got below, and then we should pretty much have everything that we need. Now I do want to do a cool silver and a aged bronze. The silver, I know how I'm going to approach that, so we're only experimenting for the bronze here. Right, let's try a softer one, more dilution. Obviously still got quite a lot of it held in the brush. Just okay. A little bit more Snakebite. Let's try a really thin one. This is majority Snakebite, but I'm just going to use it much more lightly, almost like a glaze. Add in a bit of Gore Grunter, see how that looks. It's a strong one. Really is strong. So after doing that, I think maybe what we need is quite a lot of contrast medium. There we go. So this is why experimentation is worth it, because all of these paints have different properties, especially the contrast. They're all over the place in terms of coverage or viscosity or anything else, and also the amount of time that you've had them, that affects both of those too. So yeah, I reckon that is it. So medium dilution, mix of bit of both, using the Snakebite to rein back the kind of the deep tone of this a little bit, and we're good. So let's try and replicate that again, and we'll do this with exact ratios. So I'll clean my brush. 1 part contrast medium, half a part Snakebite leather, half a part Gore Grunter. That's nearly edged. A tiny bit too dark. Or is it? That actually looks quite nice. No, I think that's pretty good actually. No, I can always dilute it and do it twice for depth, but I think that's great. So hopefully you guys can see there, you know, the reasons behind planning and experimenting like this. I think it's really invaluable. We are going to let this dry. That is super important. So I'm going to go away for a bit and come back, and hopefully we'll be able to see exactly how much these change when they dry, because they will, and it also will give us the opportunity to put a varnish down on top of them if we want to do any further experimentation. Got our recipe. Let's rock on with the base coating. Now I'm going to just quickly build up a brown base here. You could airbrush this, you could rattle can this. It genuinely, do not get fixated on exactly how you're applying the gold. If you aren't dry brushing it, just make sure you wash it a couple of times or something to add in some contrast before you go through to the contrast stage. So, you know, you could use a black wash or something to push the recesses. I think dry brushing is going to give us the best result here though, so I'm going to dry brush. I've got small, and I'm going to get bigger probably after these stages. That may sound a bit weird, but the reason I want to be using a small at this point is that I just want to make sure that I'm getting into all the nooks and crannies of the model, and especially given that I glue the shield on, which probably I shouldn't have, I think that's going to be helpful. So we're going to do a pretty heavy overbrush here of all of the figure. Dry brushed him all over, started doing the dry brushing of the shield here. I've actually just snuck a little bit of a purple dry brushing at the bottom, just to experiment and see how that goes, but we're not trying to do anything super fancy here. We are just going for a standard Retributor dry brush. Don't worry too much about cleaning your brush out if you've got the brown still in there. Really isn't something that you need to be concerned with. What you do need to be concerned with is how potent this paint is though, so work it into your brush fairly well on your palette. See how much we got leaving here. About enough to do an edge highlight if needed, but you know, no more than that. And then we're just going to buff the entire thing. Now you can concentrate more on the top areas, but I'm just going all over, and those edges should kind of naturally pick up themselves. And what we're going for here is this slightly grainy, not as in, you know, like lumps of texture, but you know, sparkly sections. I want that to look pitted, and it's already been helped on its way by GW, but I want to make it look like it's been through the wars, aged, tarnished. So I'm going to go all over with quite a soft touch. I'm going to bring this guy right up. It's already looking good though. Like you could you could literally just leave this at that without any washes at all. It's already a super solid technique. Any silver will do here. No surprises what I'm using. Just taking a tiny bit. So I'm going to wet my brush first. Wet is, you know, I'm using the dampening pad, so wet is a perhaps overzealous word for just how little moisture I'm adding, but I am adding some. Work it into the brush very carefully, and let's see what this does to the shield. Okay, so a little bit more. Wonderful, exactly what we're going for. It's always looking brilliant with this gold on, but you need to be so careful with the silver step because you really can obscure the color that you're going for. Now we are using a warm yellowy browny wash, which will really help pull things back, but still, you know, you want to retain as much of that gold as possible. This model's got armor everywhere sneakily, so the reason for doing this step first is it's really messy. It's going to get everywhere. We'll wash all of these, and then at that point we can go in and you know, base coat the other sections. So I might base coat them now, but I think actually I'll do the wash because it might get a bit messy, and then we can look at the other sections afterwards. Time to make up a little batch of the mix that we experimented with earlier. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've stepped down to a smaller brush here because it's going to give me more control over the accuracy of the measurements, just in case I want to know for future uses. So we've got 4 parts contrast medium, 1 part Gore Grunter. This is an older brush as well. It has seen better days. And 1 part Snakebite. Now straight away that looks a little bit darker than what we had, so what we can do, get it somewhere and test it, and then the other thing is pick somewhere low down on the model that's going to get nice and dark anyway, and let's see how this looks over here. Might actually turn out to be okay. I think I'm going to sneak a little bit more medium in there, but I will paint all of his foot carefully with it in a thin layer just to see how this color is. That is looking properly tarnished. I think I'm going to put a couple more scoops of contrast medium in there though, just for safety. Can always do something twice. One more for good luck. It's a strong mix. See how it looks on the other greave. So that's behaving a bit more like a wash now. I could have gone too far, let's see. No, I think we're going to be good with that. So as I always say with contrast, I'm not just slapping it on, I'm putting it on, making sure it doesn't pull too much in any one location, and I'm trying to keep it from getting too thick as well. Nice. That looks great. Load of age and depth in there. We'll see when it's dried because it will matte out a bit, but that looks pretty awesome. Super pleased with that. Now for our sail, we're going to do something a bit interesting here. You could pick any color you wanted here and it could be black. So if you're just looking to go straight down the line with dark silver to lighter silver, rock on, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. A little bit of the purple, take it into the silver. I think what we're going to have to do, because the purple is so nuts, is just take a little bit of black. I'm going to use a Baden, and as normal, my reason for using a Baden over something else is that it doesn't have great coverage and it's not too strong, so it is quite forgiving. Okay, that's knocked that back a bit now. So this guy just had a darker dry brush. It was the brown plus the purple in exactly the same fashion. Because this has got some non-metallic paints in it, it's not going to be nearly as shiny as our first layer was with the gold. That's quite nice, it's quite forgiving, it lets us build up a base coat and then we can transition to something that is truly shiny by the time we get to our last stages. This all over, and then what we're going to do is just increase the amount of silver that we've got in our mix. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're just going to increase the proportion of the silver, taking a dot into our brush. We'll do that instantly, so don't rush this, don't scoop up too much. You want to keep some of what you had in your brush previously in there, and absolutely do start this as lightly as possible. Now, what we're going to do at this stage for this guy is, while there's a tiny bit on the brush, really lightly hit him, and I mean really lightly, and there is barely any silver on this brush whatsoever. Go back to the dampening pad to help the paint exit a bit more easily, but we're not adding more paint. Just going to buff this up, take a tiny bit more, really work it in. It should just help a few of the details pop that little bit more, or suggest chipping or heavy wear on the edges. All right, there we go. So you could super happily put that on your table like that. I think that looks fantastic. These are helpful models though, they're gorgeous. So Silver Dude, non-Silver Dude. Silver Dude hasn't been washed yet. As ever, up to you if you want to do another stage there. I want to make him properly cool Midnight Skeleton versus, you know, Desert Skeleton. So I'm going to try out something a little bit renegade for this. We are going to use a skeleton color, literally Skeleton Horde. I'm using this because it's quite weak and it's a fairly benign base. You know, it's not got a huge amount of personality, this one, in my opinion. Pop that down, bit of contrast medium. And then what we're going to do is going to take a tiny bit of the purple that we used earlier, a tiny bit, A little bit, not quite enough. That's like ketchup. Okay, I will dilute that further. There you go, guys. You get to see it. Mistakes and all. One more drop of that. It's quite a nice color now. And then 2 big blobs of contrast medium. Now what this is going to do is just going to maintain that kind of midnighty, ever so slightly purple hue that we were after. And the skeleton horde that's in there will lean into kind of aging it a bit more as well. The other thing that something like this will do is if you've got rivets on your armor, which are beautiful little points for, you know, touches of light or reflection or something like that on armor always, this will pull around them and that just helps them pop a bit. So I do like a wash on armor for this reason, amongst many others. So for his cloak, I'm actually going to use a method from one of our very popular videos on painting leather. People seem to really like the warmth to it, and it seems perfect for this. So what's required for that is a scrag brown base coat. So this may take a couple. It isn't a base paint, but it will be worth it. I'm going to give this 2 or 3 thin coats on all the bits I want to be straggly leather. Already a lovely colour. Bit too vibrant and warm currently, so what we're going to do is knock it back with a classic mix. This is from our leather video. We're going to be using 1 part Nuln Oil to 3 parts Seraphim, and we're going to do a couple of stages. Now, especially on the first coat, this won't look like it's doing too much, but after a few, it should do some work for us for sure. Layer 1 is dry. I actually just put down some Rakal flesh on the bones because I think that's the colour I'm going to go for, and I think I can wash it with the same mix. So stage 2 all over the cloak, and now we're going to be adding it to the bony sections too. I think this is a perfect colour. So what we should end up with is a very coherent kind of sepia warm toned model with all the bits tying really nicely together. It's quite easy to miss bits on these skeletons, so I've just realised that these little sections here are leather, so I've painted those in scrag brown, and then there's a little bit of what I think is bone here. So yeah, I've just picked those out and they'll get a couple of coats. What I'm going to do now is I've only got 1 more stage of the wash to go, and at this point I'm going to hit the straps up with a very dark grey, and I'm going to hit all the little bindings around the wrists. I think I want something a little bit more bright on this to pop. I'd like it to only be a small detail, so I'm going to actually use my fist on red on that, and then all of those stages I hit will be hit with another coat of the wash. The bone is starting to look really aged now, and the whole piece looks pretty cohesive because it's pretty much all in the same colour scheme, which has got a really powerful effect. In fact, the sword's kind of standing out as looking a little bit too different, so I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, but we will work it out. Okay, looking good. Kind of tied all of that in. We now have a couple more dry brushing stages and we'll be good to go. I'm going to give the skeleton's bones a very light touch dry brush, and then we're going to treat up the leather. The dry brushing of the leather should knock down the shininess to it and make it look a bit more aged, which will be perfect because it does look a little bit too glossy now for something that's meant to be really old and haggard. And initially we're going to start off just repeating the coat that's under there. I do want this to be very light and very soft though, so I'd describe this as, you know, more of a, it's almost like a buffing. So it will be extremely soft, very little on the brush. What it should do is just take those bits that stick out a bit more than the rest and really add some age to them, and also make them less shiny, which is important, as I mentioned before. Alright, so onto the bone. I'm not going to completely exit out and fully clean my brush here. Something to be mindful of Rakal flesh is that solo it can be a bit grainy, so I'm going to mix a bit of a layer paint in with this. It does not matter what it is, as long as it's the closest possible colour to this. So, you know, whether that's a Xandri dust or anything like that, that'll be absolutely fine. And use a little bit of Morghast bone. It's quite difficult to get close to Rakal flesh actually, because most of the other paints like Grey Seer are a base. For highlights, you can add any bright colour you like to the mix. Doesn't matter, just whichever one you prefer. I use Karak Stone, but you could use a white if you wanted to go really bleached. Perfect. It's a lot of depth there from 2 stages of dry brushing, quite soft as well. So after a little dry brush, put down some quick highlights. Just using Scrag again, it's in the base coat, so I'm using an M2 here. So with that done, apart from maybe some cross hatches or something which I may add on because they do look beautiful on this type of leather, for which I just use Deathclaw or something like that, he is looking pretty awesome. The Verdigris is definitely going to add a bit to this if at all possible. And yeah, really pleased with them. So Midnight Skeleton, we are going to take exactly the same approach as we did with the other one, except we're just using different colours. So it's going to be an Agrax and Nuln mix for the wash. We used Rhinox hide mixed with a purple to base him, so the Rhinox hide will return for the highlights. And he's even going to have red straps in the same fashion as the other one. And yeah, exactly the same, just with a different set of colours. That's Soldier Blue. We'll ignore that. It is going to be the purple. Where are we? There we go. Orlando Violet. Whoops. You know, Soldier Blue, even when I don't want to put it in, it still sneaks its way in. Anyway, the purple will be sneaking into a load of these colours, and shortly we'll be able to weather them both, which I think is going to be where we really kind of unlock the hidden potential of these pieces. Time to do some very tiny scale dry brushing. I've got a little bit of Screaming Skull on my palette here, and a tiny bit of the purple too, and I mean a tiny bit of a purple. Mix these together here, you get a slightly kind of off pastel hue. Test it on the edge of the base, and then we're just going to very gently buff these up. Take a little bit of patience, but we'll manage to get a pretty soft, cute result without it making its way onto anywhere else, and it really does give you a very kind of natural highlight. I've already done it on the face here and the back of the fingers, but I'll give you an idea of that. Then if you want to highlight that, a tiny bit of ivory. Again, when I say tiny, we mean tiny. Work it in. There we go. So we are now at the weathering stage, and I'm going to start off with not the warm one. We're going to be doing the warm colors as the weathering on this. So this is steel, so we're going to make it rusty, obviously. Start off with a little bit of Doom Ball. I will take a tad of the purple again, work it in here. This is just because it's going to look like a very, very different color, and we want at least the first stage of this to be, you know, a tiny bit subtle. So this is going to be concentrated around rivets and areas where the rust would collect. So instantly, hopefully that shows up. We've completely changed the personality of this piece. He's got these little red dots around him, but introducing it on the armor too has really brought in a large point for contrast. I'm going to dilute the mix quite a lot before going to the shield, just because it could be a bit scary. That's it. So all over, take that approach. This is of course optional, and you could use something quicker, like mixing it in 50-50 with a shade and then bobbing it over the entire thing, and then maybe mopping it up from the recesses or something, but I'm going to be a bit more specific because I want to keep it fairly controlled. On the subject of control, even though I'm using a 1M here, which is quite a fat brush, you can absolutely suggest some streaking if you wanted to from below those rivets, or any section really, you know, it's up to you. And very simply, all we do is we shrink the area that we're doing it in, and we use pure Doom Ball, and we'll transition through the normal mix. So we'll go from Doom Ball to Scrag. Of course, these are the warm colours we've used on our other model, and then we'll jump into Troll Slayer, maybe even Fire Dragon Bright at the end. Right, and then the Verdigris, you're going to approach in exactly the same fashion, but we're going to be transitioning from Sotek Green, firm favourite of mine, through Pastel Green from AK to Ivory. You could exchange these colours for any equivalents you have. I don't think it makes too much of a difference, especially for weathering, but just make sure that you go from a more dilute, more general mix. So my first stage will be wetter. This wet, very watery. And then by the time you get through to the final stage and you're being more specific about where you place things, you'll have a less dilute mix, and that'll let you, dot it exactly where you need in the recesses. But otherwise, exactly the same as our previous one. Again, this is going to be the introduction of the first cool color on the model, so whatever you do is going to look a little bit scary. Now, Verdigris, as far as I apply it on models, it's not so much going to be affected by gravity. It will just, corrosion will be in the areas that are not going to get scraped clean, basically the bits that haven't been scraped or buffed or, battle damaged, whatever it is. So I'm going to concentrate this mainly around recesses, just like the other one, but it doesn't matter whether it's at the top or bottom at this stage. So all over, we're going to do that. I mean, it's already made an awesome difference on it. Look what that's brought to the miniature, and especially on places like these little touches of scale mail, it should really add something pretty special to this. The shield, I mean, let's give that some time now. Dilute things a little bit further, and I'm pretty happy for this to have quite a lot on it, so I'll probably give it 2 general washes, see where they collect, and then I'll more specifically back it up in those areas. So final and very optional stage, we've put in some of the ivory with the pastel green, and I'm just going to use this to dot and accentuate the recesses. Doesn't have to be full flat lines. In fact, doing this kind of stuttering or broken will help suggest that it's a natural processes. We're not trying to, clean edge highlight here. So final detailing step, I'm just going to bring out the extra small d, and we're going to use this for some hopefully specifically random chipping and edge highlighting. Just trying to imagine the places that would get the most traffic in battle. Not looking for things to be completely uniform. As you get less on your brush, you should be able to dab in and catch even edges that aren't, right on the very edge and easy to get. Just avoid the temptation to do this too much, because otherwise you'll end up with a clean edge. That's not what we're going for. Beautiful. Look at the age we just added to that. You can absolutely put a little bit around where the rust is to help homogenize it. Now, as far as this guy's concerned, with the same brush, we're just going to use it to pick out some of those edges again, and make sure that all the bits that stick out are the bits that are the most shiny. And if you've got any specific areas you want to be brighter, like you want the top of the shield to look shiny, or you want this side of his chest plate to look shiny, then you can just go in there and buff it until you're happy with it. Do be aware of flakes appearing at this stage. Not a worry though, you can just flick them off. So we are done. Really pleased with this one. As I said, I think those colors are just so cool. The Verdigris lets you go crazy on the characters if you want to do it, in several stages, or fancy, or streaking down or something like that. But it is a great way to just add a pop, and it's quite enjoyable. This guy, I think he turned out, the last step I did, buffing the one side of the armor, this side more than this side, that is the most efficient 10 to 15 seconds I've spent in a long time on a miniature, because honestly, it just makes him look grounded in reality, which is you know, a pretty good achievement for a Raised from the Dead skeleton. But hopefully that's showing up nicely on the camera there. You can see this side's just more shiny. I've done it on his helmet as well, and that just means that because of the pose, I picked that side because he's kind of chest up anyway, so it allows the sun to hit him from this direction, or moon, you know, probably moon, given how we painted him. But yeah, that was really, really efficient. Made such a big difference there. I can't help just tilting it in the light to see what it's done for the paint job. Yeah, really, really, really good use of Baby D, and just putting a little bit of time into that. This stuff is great. I cannot recommend this enough. It's kind of fun. You will learn a massive amount. You'll learn the personalities of the contrast paints, and you know, especially if you've got an old one of these kicking around, you could fit maybe 20 or 30 squares on and just complete them over time, and then put it there as literally like a reference card. So now I'll set this to the side, and until I've covered these all over with priming or whatever, if I want to test out my metals for the rest of the vampire counts that I'm going to be painting, I'll just refer to this, and it can be used as a resource. Anyway, that is it. Please do let me know what you would like me to cover next. From the vampire counts, we have a Blood Knight build, so that will happen probably in a similar scheme to the Vampire Lord, because it works out so well. I don't see why we'd change it. Do let us know what other vampire counts models you'd like to see covered on the channel. I have a Blood Knight assembled, but if people still are enjoying the vampire theme, or Vampire Week as we've ended up on by accident, then I could be tempted by one of the larger monsters. I do have them as well, because I can't help myself. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please give the video a like if you liked it and found it useful. Please comment, let us know what you'd like to see coming next. Subscribe, and if you are subscribed, hit that bell notification to be notified for more future impending vampire releases. So, well, releases from us. I think Games Workshop have probably run out of vampire models to release at this rate, although I'll take any more they've got because I really liked it. Anyway, that's it. Enough the waffling. I will catch you in the next video.